Self-awareness can provide us a sort of comfort where we take pride in realizing patterns and seeing the destructive nature of our own habits, of our own behaviors, and we take pride in being able to notice them instead of transforming ourselves in a way where we overcome those things that are preventing us from experiencing life in a real way. You're able to read social settings, but at the same time, you're socially anxious because you're always trying to decipher what people think and believe about you. And since you have this notion and perspective of yourself that you are self-aware and that you are socially aware and that you are emotionally intelligent, you're going to start to believe that the things that you think other people are believing about you, the things that you assume that they believe about you, is the truth. And that's where self-awareness could steer us in the wrong direction. Also, when we're too self-aware, we're always looking to improve. We're always looking to critique as a result of our self-analysis. But these mental games that we play with ourselves is not an adequate replacement from the teachings that would happen if we just actually lived our lives. We need to seek experiences, even if it's out of our comfort zone, even if we have to face discomfort, whatever it may be. We do have to undergo living life to get better at living life. As a result of difficult situations and going through them, you become better equipped at dealing at difficult situations in the future. And that's just the way it is. Imagined scenarios that you play in your head, even if they are ultra realistic, they are not a replacement for actual lived experiences. We should use our self-awareness, of course, to see those destructive habits and avoidant behaviors that we're taking, but we should use that self-awareness and fuel it into bravery and resilience. Because there are many self-aware people who isolate, who take a very comfortable route. It's the very common story of, you know, the creative and ambitious person that doesn't actually take action. And there's a lot of people out there like that, and the chances are if you clicked on this video, you might be one of them. So when I say you've become too self-aware, what I mean is you have misinterpreted the game of life for rewarding intellect instead of the bravery needed to actually experience life. You don't gain points to your character, to your life, by thinking and imagine scenarios. You gain confidence, you gain charisma, you gain mental resilience and peace of mind by living through a variety of different situations in a variety of different environments. You become less limited and you become expansive. It's not only an upward trajectory that we're doing in our lives. This sort of self-improvement, it's not a lateral movement always going up. It's actually getting wider is what we need to be doing. And when we expand ourselves, we expand our sort of target and our level of reach for blessings and good things to happen in our life. The overly self-aware person might say, I know so much. I understand psychology. I feel as though I understand human behavior. So why do I still feel so trapped? It's because you're misinterpreting the game. You're not going to be rewarded for your self-awareness. You're not going to be rewarded for the things that you notice. You're only going to be rewarded as a result of the actions you take upon that observance. When you create ripples in reality through your actions, when the effects come into place as a result of you being the cause, then we reap the rewards and we gain the points towards our life. I want you to think about two different experiences and phases in your life. I want you to think about the first phase as being a time where and it might be right now, a time where you isolated very heavily. You stayed home a lot. You didn't talk to that many people. You felt kind of in your own bubble. And there is, if it's happening now, a sense of peace to that. There's a very deep sense of comfort. But then notice as an event comes up, as something pops up in your path, something uncomfortable, something that is going to force you to expand and go beyond your comfort zone. Think about how uncomfortable that is after staying alone and sort of in hibernation for so long. You're out of the flow of life. You're out of the flow of things. And don't mistake that isolation and comfort for peace. That's not true peace. That's an avoiding comfort. And if you were to stay alone in that hibernation long enough, even your room would start to turn into a anxious ridden zone. Even the very comfort zone that you cling to, the very room, being under your sheets, watching a movie, even that, as beautiful and as amazing it is, even that would start to become disastrous if you didn't force yourself to leave your comfort zone. And now imagine another situation. Think about a time in your life when you were doing many different things. You were involved in a variety of different hobbies, and maybe life was requiring you to be in many different places at once. Think about how maybe your stress levels were up, but you weren't necessarily so triggered by particular events in terms of your anxiety. You didn't feel as uncomfortable upon these minor events popping up here and there. And that's because when you do things and you're outside and you're participating in life, you grow a tolerance to life in general. And it makes that alone time and that watching a movie, it makes that feel so much more peaceful and relaxing because you, in a way, you earned it. The flow of life requires emotion through and I'm not going to call them obstacles, but I'm going to call them doorways. You know, you wake up in the morning and you have somewhere to be in an hour. Okay. And then after that, you have somewhere to be in 3 hours. Okay. Then after that, an hour. And then you got to be somewhere for 30 minutes and then this and then that. You know, I think the line between being busy and being in the flow is very thin. And it's all about our state of being in terms of what kind of emotional state are we bringing into our daily life. And especially when we choose to make ourselves busy, I think that's almost optimal. Because now you're using your self awareness to see, okay, what do I really want out of my life? What do I really want my day to look like? What's going to bring me purpose? What's going to bring me joy? And then you center your day around doing things to fuel that purpose, to make you feel good inside. And you're not allowing your self awareness to only notice the things that would make you good. And so, sorry to interrupt my sentence, you know, mid topic, but I think it's really important to understand that. But now you're using your self awareness to realize the things that you want out of your life. And you're also using your spirited will and power to create motion in life, and understanding that being busy isn't a bad thing. Even if you don't like the feeling of being busy, you're going to dislike the feeling of being uncomfortable and isolated far more. Self awareness creates a bubble, a mental bubble, and it's a result of what do we do from gathering the information from that bubble. So, our self awareness tells us we shy away from difficult conversations. What do you think the answer is in this situation? To continue to avoid difficult situations and own the fact that we don't like difficult conversations and we have a hard time with difficult conversations. So now every single person we meet, we have to tell them we struggle to have difficult conversations. No, we expand ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to be limited by the things and the sort of natural impulses that we are self aware of. So we practice having difficult conversations. At first, not as deep, and then you go deeper and deeper and deeper until maybe you're even exploring and sharing your deepest, darkest truths with another person. If you're self aware enough to realize you have a hard time standing up for yourself and speaking your truth, we don't own that. We don't own the fact that we're an introvert or that we're shy or that we have a hard time standing up for ourselves and speaking up for ourselves. No, we expand ourselves. And as a result of that expansion, life in its fortune, the game of life, and gathering points and gathering sort of, I don't know, I guess you could call them like a happy meter, a satisfaction meter out of life. That's how we make ourselves a large target to gathering those sort of points. Right now, more than ever, especially with social media, we have a dependency on intelligence and intellect, and we've much of the time lost our connection with intuition. You know, we have to forge a trust in ourselves that as we go through the experiences of life, we'll be able to figure it out as we go. In a given situation, we don't have to plan out the entire situation in our head to be able to deal with it and be properly equipped to handle whatever emotional turmoil may be involved in that situation. We have to trust ourselves, and we build this trust by living in a variety of different environments, in living in a variety of different situations. Exposure to the world is going to create a better relationship with ourself in the world. Because reality in itself is sort of alive. Not alive like maybe me and you are alive, but it's alive like an ocean is alive. It's flowing, it has a current. And if you never get in the water, if you're never willing to participate, if you're never willing to learn how to ride the waves, how are you ever supposed to get better at living life? And the thing is, we can't just imagine how to ride a wave, because you can do all the planning in your head, but you wouldn't be able to predict that big wave from coming in the middle of a set out of nowhere and sort of, throwing you for a loop and making you do a front flip in the water. The metaphor is getting a little bit out of hand now, but there's a hyper self-analysis trend, and people are starting to take pride in the things that are quote unquote wrong with them instead of taking pride in the fact that they could change those things. And changing those things comes from realizing that, your self-awareness is a gift. For whatever reason, you are self-aware. I don't know if you chose to be self-aware. It feels like something that just happened, right? You just happen to be self-aware. So let's treat it as a gift, and let's use it as a gift that it is. And realize that your self-awareness of yourself is actually pointing you into realizing that the very self that you are aware of doesn't really exist. And it's an idea and a system that you're giving power to. And what you really are, the true nature of who you are, is the awareness of the self. So your ability to be aware of yourself as a person, as the character you're playing, that's a gift. Because that's the true essence of who you are. And all you have to do is switch the mode in which you're embodying that self-awareness and start to see that being aware of this self is in itself a separation that you can use to completely transform your life. Because right now you may be aware of the self, but you don't necessarily know what to do with said self. You don't know how to transform it in a way where now you are observing and you are aware of a different self. And the answer is use your self-awareness, see all the little behaviors from big to small, from words to actions, see all of the behaviors that you are taking in your life that you believe are fueling a certain idea and narrative of who you are as a person. So if you avoid difficult conversations, if you don't speak up for yourself, if you don't go out of your comfort zone, all these things, all these natural tendencies that you have, and be brutally honest with yourself, because that's the gift of self-awareness, is that we can be brutally honest about who we are, or rather, who we're embodying as a person, as an archetype. And then do the opposite of those things. Replace those behaviors with behaviors that embody the type of person that you would want to be. You're going to start to see that even though we get lost in the character that we play in life, even though we forget that we are playing a character, we are always going to be playing a character. And that self-awareness that you have, that awareness of the self, is the real essence of who you are. So we can use it positively, but it's about picking out those behaviors. You can enter self-analysis mode, but you don't have to be in it for very long. If you see the avoidant behaviors, replace them with confident behaviors. And yeah, it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel tense. It's going to feel awkward at first. It's going to feel inauthentic. But realize that you have no self to be loyal or authentic to. What's authentic is your awareness of the self, your observation of you as a person, your observation of your identity, of the type of person that you are projecting and that you are bringing into the world. And it doesn't actually exist. The only thing that's keeping that engine running is your idea of who you are and the type of person you're bringing to the table as a result of the narrative you're telling yourself about who you are. So all we have to do is play a different character. And obviously, we don't go too far with this. We become a version of ourselves. We don't become a different person. We become a version of ourselves that isn't stacked with defense mechanisms and avoidant behaviors. We become a version of ourselves who doesn't listen to anxiety and fear as a sort of compass to living life. There is no comfort in the environment and in the sort of physical conditions of self-awareness. And what I mean by that, that might sound kind of contradictory, but what I mean by that is our self-awareness will convince us that the logical thing to do is to avoid life because who we are as a person, that's the cards that we've been dealt. So there's nothing else to do except accept those cards. But the crucial thing that you're missing is that the whole point of life is to play those cards differently. You know, your natural impulses, the way you naturally express yourself, these naturally fearful and anxious behaviors that you have, you know, those were the cards that you were dealt. And transforming yourself and taking out those behaviors and replacing them with ones that you consciously chose to embody, that's the whole point. That's when awareness took form and molds the self. And now, in my opinion, now I think we have the expression of consciousness itself. When awareness realizes that the self is malleable and that we can mold the self in any which way that we want to become the creator and influencer of our reality, that's the nature of consciousness. And I can expand more on that maybe in the next video. But otherwise, thank you for listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, thank you as always. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.